We have a special guest for you all today. Joining us now is Pastor Corey B. Brooks, who's the founder and senior pastor of New Beginnings Church of Chicago and the founder and CEO of Project Hood, which stands for Helping Others Obtain Destiny. He actually wrote a piece in Newsweek that caught my attention titled, "Democrats are siding with criminals over their victims. They're destroying our communities." Now, it's a strong statement. I have a lot of questions about it. And Pastor Brooks, thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show and talk to us today.
Thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity for being on.
I wanted to just start off by saying thank you for what you're doing with Project Hood, because I think, well, first of all, why don't you tell the audience a little bit about what you do with Project Hood? Because I think these are the kinds of programs that we should be investing a lot more of our resources into.
Sure. So Project Hood is a non-for-profit organization. Hood stands for Helping Others Obtain Destiny. We focus on eradicating violence and poverty in our neighborhood, one neighborhood at a time. We do that by offering programs such as job training, the construction trades, entrepreneurship, financial literacy, trauma counseling. We have a violence prevention team that leads the city in violence prevention. The violence in our neighborhood is down 52% as far as shootings and murders go. While the rest of our city is continuing to go up, we're seeing ours go down. And our goal is to create opportunities for as many people as we possibly can, especially those who have lost hope, those who have lost belief in the American dream. That's what we attempt to do every single day.
Yeah, I love that. And before we go on with what you wrote in your piece, what's very clear to me is that you genuinely believe that people are redeemable, can be rehabilitated, but you're noticing something happening in terms of the group of people who push for certain policies without actually touching base with the communities that these policies would impact. So you write in your piece, quote, "In the 2 years since George Floyd was murdered, we have had the Black Lives Matter movement, the Defund the Police movement, the diversity, equity, and inclusion movement, and the movement to remove ACT and SAT tests, stripping schools of honors classes and wasting valuable time on white privilege instead of educating our kids upward. The latest is the Safety Act," which I'm gonna ask you about in just a moment, "which would abolish the cash bail system." And then you continue to write, "These movements have all been pushed by elites in the name of helping blacks, but not one of these people has ever visited my neighborhood to ask what we think. It's almost like we have no say, like we are some sort of a social experiment, pawns without minds of our own." I thought that was a powerful statement to make. So I wanted to bring you on to share your perspective and what you think.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, ever since the 60s, especially in cities like Chicago, the late 60s, we've been experiencing a real blatant disrespect of our culture as far as liberals believing that they know what's best for us, and never considering conversations, never considering meetings, never sitting down with us. It's always these elite liberals who think they can speak on our behalf when they cannot. I work in this community, I live in this community, and I see the impact that some of these policies have every single day. And I think that sometimes, and I believe sometimes the policies are made, are done from possibly their heart, but without a lot of mind. And what I mean by that is, I don't think that they're doing it, satanically, or they just mean something ill. I just think that they disregard the individuals who live in our community, and they never give us the opportunity to speak, and they never give us an opportunity to talk about the.
All right, so the last thing we heard you say was, that you feel that you guys aren't given the opportunity to share your perspective or be part of these conversations, even though you suspect that a lot of these policy proposals have a lot of heart, but maybe they're not thinking about the unintended consequences of them.
Right. That is correct. I think that is where we find ourselves in the predicament that we do as it relates to Chicago and other major cities across the country. There are a lot of policies being put on the table without the consideration of the people who live in the community. Just like the Safety Act that we're experiencing, that we're talking about, or we're getting ready to talk about in just a few seconds. That is a prime example of what we're dealing with. Education is another big example. We have a failing school school system here in Chicago, but we keep putting these policies in place in disregard of the community. And that's the reason why it's so important that people like me become more vocal in saying what we believe needs to happen.
So there's so much to get to here, but let's start with one of the policies, cash bail. So you wrote against it. Now the proponents of cash bail say, well, look, it just punishes you for being poor, because if you do the same crime and you're rich, you can just pay the bail and leave. And if you're poor, you can't pay the bail and then you get stuck in prison. It's the same crime, but it's really punishing you for your societal status, income, etc., instead of the crime. So I'm curious what your take on that is and what you respond to that.
Thank you. First of all, I believe that we needed to consider the victims. I think that we're putting too much emphasis on criminals and allowing them the opportunities that we should not afford them. Yes, everyone is innocent until proven guilty, but at the same time, we need to consider how victims feel, how the community, the impact that it's making on our community. So when we let these individuals out of jail without any bail, without any consequences, number one, we're hoping and praying that they come back, because it's highly likely that they're not gonna come back for a lot of these offenses. And secondly, we're hoping that they don't commit other crimes, which is highly likely that they're gonna commit other crimes. And so we need to consider the victims, we need to consider community, and I believe there are other ways to get this equity that people are trying to get, which we need to consider.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think the problem with the bail system is that it's being used as a way to determine whether or not someone is a threat to public safety. You see what I'm saying? So like the amount determined usually has to do with whether or not the judge thinks the individual is a threat to public safety. I think there needs to be some other mechanism not tied to bail that determines whether or not someone should get pretrial release. But I also see the argument made by those who are against cash bail, because if you're innocent until proven guilty. So if you're poor and you're accused of some sort of petty crime that didn't actually cause bodily harm to anyone, what if you're innocent? You're spending that time behind bars, you're not able to post bail, and then you're probably losing your job, your life is being destroyed. I think that's a legitimate problem. And so I totally sympathize with what the no cash bail proponents are saying. I just think that it needs to be tweaked in a way to ensure that, like, if someone is caught, for instance, on camera brutalizing others, which there have been examples of that, we've talked about it on the show, well, that person's a threat to public safety. You know what I'm saying? And you don't want them to be released immediately to go and then later go around, further brutalizing people in that community. I wanted to ask what your thoughts are on just our criminal justice system, even prior to these proposals and some of these policies being implemented. Did you have any issues with it? Do you see areas that absolutely need reform? What are your thoughts?
Well, I am for prison reform. I'm a conservative, but I am for prison reform. There's no doubt about it that we need that. But there's also no doubt about it that we have criminals among us, and that those criminals need to be dealt with. One of the things that I will say, back to what you were saying about the bail system, is that we're not talking about petty offenses. I think a lot of us could agree that for some of these petty offenses, sure, no bail, we understand. Just recently, we had one of the candidates who running for governor, his life to be threatened. That individual bonded out and was able to go on house arrest. If we were under the Safety Act come January, that individual would not even have to bond out. They would not even have to be under house arrest. And that's a problem when individuals can commit these type of crimes and not have, or allegedly commit these type of crimes and not have any consequences other than waiting.
Yeah, I mean, just to add on to that really quick, while we figure out the tech issues. I mean, one of the other things that, because I voted in favor of no cash bail in California when it was a ballot initiative. And the reason why I voted in favor of it is because I do agree that certain people should not be held, if they can't afford bail, especially if they need to be proven guilty before any real consequences, right? But at the same time, it was sold to voters in California as a ballot initiative that would only impact nonviolent crime. Little did I know, and little did a lot of Californians know, that there are all sorts of crimes that have been reclassified as nonviolent that I think are violent. So for instance, in California, raping someone who's unconscious is not considered a violent crime.
Yeah, that's insane.
It is insane.
So but there's some things that are insane that are obvious, right? Like a lot of violent crimes are considered nonviolent crimes. We should instantly fix that. That's crazy, right? So, but I want to make sure that we get to two things. We're having some tech issues, so let me get to these. You say in Illinois you've got the Safety Act coming up, and you're very much against it. Tell us why.
Well, I think that it sides with criminals, and I think that in Illinois we have a political system ran by Democrats that disregards the victims, disregards people from our community who are already having difficulties with crime. Here in Illinois, especially Chicago, we have an enormous murder rate. We have a crazy carjacking and theft rate. We're dealing with all kind of illicit behaviors. And now we're gonna add to that you can do these behaviors and have no consequences. You can threaten lives, you can assault people, you can trespass on people's properties and not have any consequences until you go to court. And that's just not gonna work, at least with the criminals that I know. Maybe they know some different criminals, but the criminals that I know, those little smack on the hands are only gonna help them to do more crime, encourage them to do more crime.
Yeah, so Pastor Brooks, we're in a difficult situation here because some people on the left say, no, I speak for the Black community or the community of all folks in cities, etc. On the other hand, Republicans say, no, I speak for them, and that feels absurd, to be honest, okay? And so you say you're a conservative, I don't know if that means you're a Republican, but obviously Trump doesn't speak for Black people, that's absurd. It's not within 1,000 miles of true, right? But at the same time, I don't know that a rich Black person in Washington or on TV that says, I speak for all Black people, if that's true either. So how do we decide who gets this quote unquote speak for you all?
Well, I will say this, that Trump did do a lot for the Black community. I'm not saying whether I'm a supporter of Trump or not, but the things that he did for the HBCUs, the fact that the economy was for the work was unemployment was down at an all-time low for the African American community. There are certain policies that were instituted that helped our community drastically. So I can't say that, but I will say that there are individuals who are constantly voted into office who say they speak for us and they do not. And what has to happen and what should happen is that we're gonna have to take control back from those individuals to let them know that when you don't speak on our behalf, we need to hold them accountable. So what we have in our community is accountability problem. We have people who have been in political office for years and years without having to be accountable to our community. And that I don't blame anyone for that but us. We have to change that if we're gonna get them to finally listen to us. And some of that has to do with letting the Democratic Party know that just because 95% of African Americans have been voting Democrat, that's not always the way it's going to be. And we have to make sure that people fight for our votes and be accountable for our votes.
I mean, I agree with you on that. I mean, I think that the Black vote and the Latino vote has been taken for granted by the Democratic Party. I think that's been a huge problem. I mean, you have Black organizers working super hard to get 2 Democrat senators elected in the runoff races in Georgia, thinking that the Democratic Party is gonna pass a voting rights bill, and they didn't even try. So like that what you just said resonates with me, because you can't be taking your voters and your base, especially a demographic that's been incredibly loyal to you, for granted. I can't help it. I have one more question to ask you, because this stood out to me and I'm wondering why you think this happened. So you wrote about your friend Carol, who was carjacked at gunpoint, and she had called the authorities 5 times, but no one showed up. Why do you think that is? Why didn't the cops show up?
Well, I know one thing that we're experiencing here in Chicago is that we've had a large number of police who have retired and not been replaced. We are hurting for police. I believe that we're 1,400 police down from where we should be, or 1,500, and that is a problem. If you go past some of the precincts, you're gonna see cars that should be driven by police officers that are parked because there are not enough police. And so there are instances, not just by Carol, but others who have testified that they've made these calls, they haven't gotten the answers. It's taken long for the police to get there. I can even testify to the fact that we called about a carjacking, a car that was being stolen right in front of our building. The police, unfortunately, never arrived. And so I'm pro-police, first of all, and I'm for the police. And we need police in our community. I wouldn't want to live in a community without them. But I also know there is a real big shortage.
All right.
All right, Pastor Corey Brooks, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate the good work that you're doing in Chicago, and it's a different voice, and a voice that isn't often heard. So we appreciate you coming on to share with us.
Thank you, I appreciate it. Thanks for the time.
No problem. All right, and by the way, as we go to break here, I know who speaks for the community. The community does.
Yeah, of course.
So and people will take great offense at this. I don't know why they do, just because I guess they're of their egos. But you know who speaks for the community? Polling indicates which way they believe. Somebody saying, no, I know better than the polling. That's just not true. It's not true. If I say it, Pastor Brooks says it, Rando in Washington, who's a Democrat, says it, or Rando in Washington, who's a Republican, says it. No, the polling tells you what the community believes. And by the way, if you're curious, African-American community basically believes 2-to-1 that there should be more policing, not less policing. I might not agree with that, but that's not my call to make. Okay, so in that context, I'm telling you what they believe according to reliable polling. Okay, and then we can do whatever we want with that information. Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.